She was back in the village. But this village was different, quieter, stiller, as if frozen in time. The houses were crumbling, overgrown with vines, the earth cracked and dried beneath her feet. Amara felt a chill run through her as she recognized the place. It was the village she had been born in, but it was also something more, something distant, something from the past. Ahead of her, she saw a figure standing in the distance. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the shape, the posture. It was her grandmother, but she looked younger, much younger. Her eyes were still filled with sorrow, but there was something else there, something that Amara had never seen before. Regret, fear, and a kind of emptiness. Her grandmother turned slowly, as if sensing Amara's presence. Her face was filled with pain as their eyes met. Amara. Her grandmother's voice was soft, barely a whisper, but the words cut through Amara like a sharp blade. "You shouldn't have come." Amara stepped forward, her legs shaking. "Grandmother, what is this place? Why am I here?" Her grandmother looked down at her hands, as if ashamed. "This is the past. This is where it all began, the bargain I made with the Snake King. The price I paid for wealth and power was you. Your life." The truth hit Amara like a wave crashing onto the shore. "What do you mean? You sold me to him?" The old woman's face twisted with guilt. "I had no choice, child. We were poor, desperate. Your parents had no future, no hope. I thought I could save you all. But I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what he was capable of. I didn't know that it would cost me my soul and yours." Amara's hands trembled. "You didn't know? You didn't know what he was? You didn't know that selling me to him would bring all of this pain? The curse?" Her grandmother's face crumpled, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't know, Amara. I thought the Snake King was just a man, just a trickster. But he wasn't. He was powerful, ancient, and I was a fool. A fool who condemned you to a life I can never undo." Amara could feel the rage building inside her. Rage at her grandmother for making that decision. Rage at the Snake King for taking her life away from her. Rage at herself for ever believing there was a way out. But there was something deeper too, a sorrow she couldn't shake. "Is this why you've been hiding the truth from me? All these years?" Amara's voice cracked. "All this time, you've been trying to protect me, but all you've done is trap me in a lie." Her grandmother reached out, her hand trembling as she tried to touch Amara's face. "I tried, Amara. I tried to keep you safe. But I knew deep down that one day you would find out. And when you did, the curse would be yours to break. It was never meant to be yours alone, but it's the only way now. I can't undo the damage. I can't fix this." Amara felt something stir deep within her. "Then what am I supposed to do, Grandma? How can I fix this? How can I free myself from him? From all of this?" Her grandmother shook her head. "There is no simple answer, Amara. No easy way out. You will have to face him. Face the king. You will have to confront what he has made of you, what he has taken from you." Amara felt her chest tighten. Confront him? She thought of the Snake King's cruel eyes, his cold smile, his twisted power. How could she ever defeat him? How could she ever be strong enough to break the curse that had been placed on her from the moment she was born? "I don't know if I can," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. Her grandmother's eyes softened. "You have always been stronger than you know, Amara. You were born with a strength that even he cannot control. You just need to believe it. And you need to face the hardest truth of all. To truly break the curse, You must make the ultimate sacrifice. Amara's heart skipped a beat. Sacrifice? She had thought she already knew what it meant to lose everything, but this was different. She felt the weight of the words in her bones. What sacrifice? Amara asked, her voice barely audible. The old woman hesitated before speaking again. The Snake King's power comes from the bond he shares with you. You cannot defeat him without breaking that bond. And to break it, you will have to let go of the one thing that holds you to this world. The one thing you love most. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She could feel her heart pounding harder. Let go of what? Her grandmother's eyes softened with sadness, but there was a flicker of hope in them. Only then will you truly be free. You will have to choose, Amara. Yourself, or him. As her grandmother's form began to fade, like smoke being carried away by the wind, Amara felt the truth crashing down on her. She was running out of time, and she didn't know what the future held. The Snake King would come for her soon. But was she ready to make the sacrifice? Would she give up everything she had known for the chance to escape the Snake King's curse? Amara stood alone in the fading darkness, the words of her grandmother echoing in her mind like an unstoppable storm. Give up everything she knew. Sacrifice the one thing she loved most. Was she truly ready? The village around her was now completely still, as if time itself had stopped. She could no longer see her grandmother's figure, which had faded into the mist like a passing memory. But Amara felt something new, the weight of the decision pressing against her chest, heavy and unbearable. What did it mean to sacrifice the one thing she loved most? Was it her freedom? Her past? Or was it something deeper? Something that she had yet to understand? The silence around her was suffocating, and the coldness in the air sent a shiver down her spine. She had to make a choice, but she didn't know how. Was there even a right choice? As the last remnants of her grandmother's presence faded, the air shifted, and she suddenly felt the unmistakable presence of someone, or something, behind her. Amara. The voice slithered through the air, and her heart skipped a beat. It was the Snake King. She didn't need to turn around to know he was there. You can feel it, can't you? The choice you must make. His voice was like a hiss, soft yet powerful, wrapping itself around her. You think you can defy me? But there is no escape, child. There never was. Amara turned slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The Snake King stood before her, towering and regal, his serpent-like form coiling in the shadows. His eyes were a glowing amber, full of cruelty and power, and for the first time, Amara felt a cold dread settle in her bones. I've come to remind you, Amara, he continued, his smile sharp and mocking. You cannot run forever. You belong to me, and no matter what you choose, you will never escape. Amara's breath quickened as the truth of his words sank in. She was no longer just a prisoner in his palace, she was trapped in his web. His power, his control over her, stretched further than she could comprehend. She had lived with this truth for so long, but now, as the Snake King stood before her, his power felt almost overwhelming. But then, something inside her shifted. It was the memory of her grandmother's voice, the strength in her words. She wasn't powerless. She had been born with a strength that even he couldn't control. No, Amara said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. I will not be your prisoner any longer. The Snake King's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading into something darker. You think you can resist me, Amara? I am not just a king. I am the ruler of this land. You cannot fight what you cannot see, what you cannot even begin to understand. Amara swallowed hard, her mind racing. What did she have to do to break free? I know what you've done to me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but filled with determination. I know what you've taken, and I know how you've controlled me. But I will no longer be your tool. I will no longer be your prisoner. The Snake King laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. And what will you do, child? What will you do to free yourself? Amara's hand tightened into a fist, and she closed her eyes, remembering the choice her grandmother had spoken of. She had to make the sacrifice. She had to give up the one thing she loved most. But what was it? Her love for her grandmother? No. She loved her grandmother, but she had already lost her in a way that was irreversible. Her past? The memories that haunted her? No, they were already gone. There was only one thing left, her hope. Her hope for a life without fear, without the constant grip of the Snake King. Her hope for a future of freedom and peace. She had clung to that hope for so long, but now, she realized it was the very thing that bound her to the Snake King's curse. Her hope for the life she thought she could have, a life where the darkness could be driven away, was the final chain that held her prisoner. Amara took a deep breath, and in that moment, she understood. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every soul he had taken, every person he had trapped in his curse. I choose freedom, she whispered, her voice filled with an iron resolve. Before the Snake King could react, Amara closed her eyes and let go. The hope, the dream of a life free from fear and darkness, slipped from her grasp. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but it was the only way to break the curse. It was the only way to be free. And as she let go, the world around her shifted. The air grew lighter, the darkness that had once surrounded her dissipated like smoke, and the palace walls that had confined her began to crumble. The Snake King's laughter turned into a hiss of anger as he reached out to claim her, but it was too late. The bond was broken. Amara felt herself being pulled from the depths of the palace, from the grip of the Snake King, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing: she was free. But just as the last remnants of the Snake King's power faded, Amara felt a sharp, unfamiliar pain in her chest. It was as if something had torn away from her, leaving a gaping hole. She staggered, unable to breathe, and the world around her blurred. She looked down, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. The sacrifice had been made. She had lost not just her hope, but something far deeper, a part of herself she didn't know she could live without. Had she made the right choice? As her vision faded to black, she could only hope that the sacrifice had been worth it, but she had made her choice. And no matter what came next, she would face it head on. Amara felt herself falling once again, but this time it wasn't into darkness. The air around her was lighter, fresher, and filled with the scent of wildflowers. She gasped, her breath sharp in her chest as she struggled to stay conscious. Her body felt weak, drained, as though all the energy had been siphoned from her. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Perhaps everything had been a vision, a figment of her imagination. But as she blinked, the world around her became clearer. She could feel the earth beneath her, cool and soft, the gentle rustling of the trees in the distance, and the faint light of the sun filtering through the leaves. She sat up slowly, her head spinning. Her heart was still racing, but she could feel something shifting within her. What was happening? Had she really broken free from the Snake King's curse? Or was she just trapped in a new nightmare? Amara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the gaping emptiness that now resided there. The sacrifice she had made had left a hole in her soul, a void she couldn't explain. She had given up everything she had ever hoped for, everything she had fought for. and now, it felt like a part of her was missing. But she couldn't think about it for too long. She had no idea where she was, or what had happened to the Snake King. Was he still watching her, waiting to reclaim her once more? Or had she truly defeated him? As she stood up, she saw the edge of the forest ahead of her, the light growing brighter as she approached the clearing. Her legs were shaky, her body weak, but she pressed on, driven by a new urgency. She had to know. She had to understand what her choice had truly cost her. When she stepped into the clearing, her eyes widened in shock. Before her stood a figure, tall, regal, and imposing. A woman. She was dressed in a flowing white gown, her face serene and calm, yet her eyes held an intensity that matched Amara's own. "Amara," the woman said softly, her voice like the wind itself, smooth and ethereal. "You have broken the bond. You have made the ultimate sacrifice." Amara swallowed hard. "Who are you? What is this place?" The woman smiled faintly. "I am the spirit of the earth, the keeper of balance. You are standing at the threshold of what was and what could be. You have freed yourself, Amara. But freedom, like all things, has a price." Amara's head spun. "The price? What do you mean?" "I gave up my hope, my future, my freedom." The woman's eyes softened with understanding. "Yes. But in doing so, you have also given up your connection to the world you once knew. You cannot go back, Amara. The sacrifice you made has forever changed the path ahead." Amara's breath caught in her throat. "So I can never return to my family? My village? I'll never be the same person again, no," the woman said gently. "You have transcended the past, Amara. The bonds that tied you to the Snake King, to your old life, are no more. But that means you must forge a new path. A path that may be uncertain, but one that is truly your own." Amara looked down, her chest tight with the weight of the woman's words. The emptiness she felt inside her had only grown stronger. How could she move forward, knowing she could never return? The woman stepped closer, her presence calm yet powerful. "Your sacrifice was not in vain. You are free now. But freedom comes with challenges. You will have to face many trials, and the future will not be easy. But you will find strength you never knew you had. You will find a new purpose." Amara's mind was racing. A new purpose? What could that even mean? She had given everything for freedom, and now she had no idea what that freedom truly looked like. She felt like a blank slate, a person who had lost everything but had no clear path forward. "Is there anything left for me?" Amara whispered. "After all I've lost, after all I've given up, what is left?" The woman smiled again, this time with a spark of something hopeful in her eyes. "There is always something left, Amara. Even when it seems like all is lost, there is always something. The question is not whether there is something left, but whether you are willing to find it." Amara looked up at the woman, her chest tightening with a mix of sorrow and hope. She didn't know what the future would hold, and she didn't know what she was meant to do next. But for the first time, she felt like she had a choice. A real choice. She could shape her own future. The burden of the Snake King, the weight of his curse, had been lifted from her, and now it was up to her to decide what came next. "I will find it," Amara said, her voice steady. "I don't know how, but I will find a way to move forward." The woman nodded, a quiet approval in her gaze. "Then go, Amara. Walk your new path. The journey ahead will be long, but you are no longer alone. You carry the strength of your sacrifice, the power of your choices, and the hope for a future that is yours to make." As the woman's form began to fade, The clearing around Amara seemed to dissolve, and the world she had known once again shifted. She could feel herself being pulled forward, drawn by the call of the unknown. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and light, but it was hers to walk. She had made her choice. She had sacrificed her hope, her past, her very future to break free from the Snake King's curse. But now, a new future was waiting. A future she would create for herself. Amara stepped forward, the world around her shifting with each step she took. The clearing, the woman, and the ancient feeling of being trapped in a past life faded behind her. She could feel the weight of her sacrifice in her chest, a hollow emptiness, but also a sense of liberation. There was no turning back now, but for the first time, that didn't scare her. What scared her was not knowing where she was going, not knowing what awaited her in the unknown future. The path stretched before her, winding through trees that seemed to whisper with the wind, but the air was lighter, free from the heavy oppression of the Snake King's curse. There were no guards, no serpents lurking in the shadows, no walls closing in around her. Just the open world and the sound of her own footsteps as she moved forward. She didn't know where to go. She didn't know what to do, but she had to keep moving. She couldn't stand still, not after everything she had endured. As Amara walked deeper into the forest, the light began to shift. The once clear sky began to darken, and a storm appeared out of nowhere, dark clouds swirling overhead. The wind picked up, and Amara felt a chill race down her spine. She was no longer in the forest she had grown familiar with. This place felt different, wild, untamed, as though nature itself was testing her. The forest seemed to respond to her presence. The trees creaked and groaned as if warning her of something. Her heart skipped a beat. The storm wasn't just the weather changing. It was as though someone, was watching her, waiting for her to make a move. Amara didn't look back. She couldn't. She couldn't afford to be distracted. Her footsteps grew quicker as the wind howled around her, the air growing colder with each passing moment. Suddenly, a voice broke through the storm. "Why are you running, Amara?" The voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried an undeniable power. It came from the trees, from the shadows, from every corner of the forest. Amara stopped dead in her tracks. She knew that voice. "Snake King?" Her voice was barely a whisper, fear rising in her chest. She turned slowly, scanning the darkness that surrounded her, her heart pounding in her ears. The voice laughed, its sound like the hiss of a serpent. "You cannot escape me, child. You may have broken our bond, but you cannot escape what you are. You belong to the curse, Amara. You belong to me. And no matter how far you run, you will always be mine."